Perhaps that tremor in Benjamin Netanyahu's left hand is a guilty conscience at work, but probably not. More likely, he's had a premonition of the future that awaits him on the Judgment Day. Or he may just have watched Australia's ABC News. For the first time in Western media, it is now proven beyond contradiction that which we conspiracy theorists alleged from October the 7th itself. It was not the Palestinian resistance that slaughtered hundreds of revelers from a music festival being held within earshot of the world's biggest concentration camp. It was the Israeli forces themselves. Take a look back at my exchange with Piers Morgan. How incredulous he was. How utterly bemused that anyone like me could possibly say on his television show that Israel killed many of the casualties on October the 7th. Take a look at the way they ridiculed all these conspiracy theorists. It's now fact. 28 helicopter gunships emptied their belly of ammunition and made at least one trip back to base each to reload with more ammunition. Any fool should have been able to see that the devastation in the car park at the festival could not possibly have been committed by lightly armed, Kalashnikov-wielding guerrilla fighters newly escaped from a concentration camp and moving, for the most part, in light vehicles or even on foot. It was not possible that they could have done that devastation. But the video has been leaked from inside the Israel Defense Forces themselves to ABC News. You can see it yourself with your own eyes. You can see the devastation 28 helicopter gunships can deal on people, in cars, on foot. It was, as we alleged, the execution, I choose the word deliberately, of the Hannibal Directive, written by Netanyahu himself, which in short reads that no Israeli hostage will be allowed to be taken into Gaza. They will be killed before that will be allowed. And boy, how they were killed. Israel has killed many, many hostages inside Gaza, but they killed hundreds. How many hundreds? We cannot yet evaluate, but that leak will not be long in coming. But that hundreds of the casualties on October 7th were caused by Israel, not by the Palestinian resistance, can no longer be denied. Therefore, it is being ignored. Not a single, not one, not a single broadcast in Britain, in the United States, far as I know, anywhere in the Western world, has aired this footage or even referred to its existence. But it's a break in the dam. It's a break in the dam of the official information blockade on what happened to the people who died on October 7th. But it's a break in the dam of the credibility of the Western sources who have lied and lied and lied again on Israel's behalf ever since. I don't need to adumbrate the foul nature of those lies. I don't have to get down amongst the 40 beheaded babies that never were. I don't have to talk about the mass rapes that never happened. I don't have to talk about the Palestinian slaughter of 1,200 people on October the 7th, because that never happened either. Sure, the proximate reason for the Israelis opening fire on their own citizens rather than see them taken prisoner was the mass breakout from the concentration camp on October 7th. That much is true. If they had not broken out, if they had agreed, as the people of the Warsaw Ghetto did not agree, to die singly in misery on their knees behind the wire, then none of this would have happened. But the people in Gaza did exactly what the people in the Warsaw Ghetto did. They rose up. They decided to break out of their ghetto. They decided that they would rather die on their feet than on their knees. They decided that they were going to make a great cry that would be heard throughout the world about the 76 years of Calvary that they have suffered in the Holy Land. And who can blame them? Would you? What would you do if you were living behind a wire whilst foreigners from Poland and Paris, from the United Kingdom and the United States and Russia were living on your land, in your house, picking fruit from your orchard? Would you stay behind the wire, or would you, as they did, and as the people of the Warsaw Ghetto did, seek to break out, even to die, at least to be seen, at least to be heard? But the consequences for Netanyahu's government of this footage is already being felt inside Israel itself, compounded by the incessant Israeli murder of their own hostages, in most cases by bombs, in which case they could claim they didn't know they were there, but as they are the world's great espionage state, that doesn't speak highly of their security services. But some, at their own hands, face to face, up close and personal, like the five, waving a white flag, speaking in Hebrew, one of them with ginger hair, who were shot down by Israeli forces who thought they were subhuman Palestinians, or the mysterious death of the hostages last week, about which I spoke on Wednesday. Look back and see my exchange with the Friends of Israel from West Sussex. You can thank me later. The impact of this footage now in the Western media is not just tragic for the young people who suffered such an appalling death, being slaughtered by their own helicopters, flown by their own Air Force, ordnance stockpiled by their own government. It's not just tragic for them. It is fatal for Israel's public relations position across the world, just as they were getting ready to transform this coming October the 7th into an international day of mourning built on the lie that the Palestinians killed 1,200 people on October the 7th. How many the Palestinians killed is yet to be revealed. I have no doubt that many were killed, but that hundreds were killed by these Israeli gunships cannot, as I said, be contradicted any longer. And so the attempt to lift off another international wave of sympathy for Israel will now be severely dented by the presence on the internet, if nowhere else, of Western media reportage, which nails the whole thing as a bright, shining lie. And you know, you can only lie for so long. When lie after lie is unmasked, when politicians like Joe Biden say on television that they have seen photographs of 40 beheaded babies and it turns out to be a lie, when Western correspondents go off on a long foray trying to touch the requisite politically correct constituencies with horrific tales of sexual violence, which then collapse under the forensic weight of heroic journalism. So that it is now the case that Joe Biden never saw it at all. Ted Cruz never saw it at all. Rishi Sunak never saw it at all, although all claimed to have seen it. They didn't see it because it never happened. There were no beheaded babies. There was only one baby killed in the entire October 7th day, and we have no idea who killed that baby and why. But it's now looking exceedingly unlikely that that one single baby was killed by a Palestinian. On the other hand, tens of thousands of babies and small children have been killed by the same Israel that built the Tower of Lies about the 40 beheaded babies. I have seen more than 40 beheaded Palestinian babies, and there are many more that I simply could not look at any longer. Every accusation turns out to be a confession. And that's leaving aside what that heroic actress, Miss Friedland, said just yesterday at her awards ceremony. This has lasted 76 years. Not 11 months, 76 years. The Palestinians have been suffering under the shadow of the Tower of Lies that is the entire basis of the existence of a state which has gathered in people whose DNA cannot legally be extracted from them, from all over the world, in a settler, apartheid, colonial state. The natives have never accepted it. The Tasmanian natives had to be annihilated, and every last one of them was annihilated by the British settlers. Tasmania being one of those, only 22 countries in the United Nations were never invaded and occupied by Britain. Imagine. Tasmania, they wiped out the natives. In Australia and New Zealand, they did as much as they could to annihilate the indigenous people and to marginalize the rest in lives of utter, unending misery. In the Americas, from Canada all the way to Chile, 100 million natives were annihilated, either physically or by the diseases brought by the colonizers. But the colonizers in Palestine have never been allowed a single day of rest, because, as Yasser Arafat used to say to me, we are not the Red Indians. We will not go into the museum. We will never become an ex-people. He never said truer words than that. And now Israelis are having to live with the fact that it is proving impossible for one reason or another to annihilate all 8 million Palestinians living under their iron heel. The neighboring countries, Egypt and Jordan, will not open their borders to facilitate the mass transfer dreamed of by the Likud party of power in Israel. Even this rotten world will not stand by while all 8 million Palestinians are annihilated, and so they are having to live with that with which they cannot live. They cannot sustain their power in the occupied territories except by denying all political, civil, and legal rights to the people living under them since 1967. They cannot transfer them. And despite their best efforts, they're not succeeding in physically annihilating them. So they are having to live with them. Live with that with which they cannot live. Not without living permanently as an extremely violent occupier, having to dispense ever greater levels of violence in the full view of the whole world, which has now so turned against them that scarcely anyone, including the best of the Jewish people themselves, can bear to hear their name, can bear to look at their flag, can bear to see the faces and hear the voices of their leaders. They are an international pariah. I struggled against the apartheid state in South Africa. I've got to tell you, South Africa under apartheid was never remotely as hated as the apartheid state of Israel is today. So the writing is on the wall for them as the greatest of all Jews alive today said just the other day. Norman Finkelstein told them the other day that their future is now written on the wall. Increasing isolation and hatred, an exodus outwards of any Israeli with the skill set to travel, left in a circle of wagons with the savages inside the circle, not whooping around its perimeter. I don't have time to address some of the other issues that we intend to deal with tonight, but the greatest of them is the threat to freedom of speech. We have now, getting on for 500,000 followers on YouTube, but our show is being offered to fewer and fewer of them every week. We are now under algorithmic strangulation by YouTube, but thankfully not by other platforms yet. And we're the lucky ones. We haven't been stopped at the airports, either coming into London or flying out of it. We have not been arrested like Mr. Durov. I've just seen him walking calmly in Paris. He seems to have made his peace, if you get my drift, with the French authorities. We have not been banned. We have not been deplatformed yet. But we'll keep speaking on whatever platform we can find, as clearly and as loudly as we are able. Others have not been quite as lucky. Sarah Wilkinson, a 61-year-old woman, was raided at 7 a.m. by 12 police officers, several of them wearing balaclavas. They disturbed her mother's ashes. They broke her Christmas lights. They took her passport, stole her money, and banned her from using the telephone or a computer. It was one of the worst in a long series of utterly ridiculous, self-defeating blunders by various British police forces. Who told them they could get away with those bail conditions? My guess, the man that let Jimmy Savile off and did his very best to send Julian Assange to a penal colony called the United States of America. Stay tuned. We've got one of those victims coming up next. Professor Danny Shaw. Boy, does he have a story to tell. Stay tuned.